Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, excellencies, esteemed guests, members of the press. Welcome to the official closing press conference for the second United Nations Habitat Assembly. I know it sounds a little bit strange because we still have the plenaries going on and the work is continuing, but we would like to bring to you some of the results and some of the things that were achieved over the past 5 days. As you know, adoptions of resolution might take time, and the plenaries might not be adjourned until very, very late in the evening. So that is why we would like to take this opportunity to update you on what is going on, what's been the highlights and what was the work of this assembly. And then once the results of the adoption of the resolutions are going to be available, we will issue a press release informing you what would be the results. So with this, I would like to thank my esteemed guests who are going to update us about the results and the work of the Assembly. And we have a number of speakers with us today. First of all, I would like to welcome His Excellency Vice President of the United Nations Habitat Assembly, Martin Ajay Mensah Korsa, who is going to be on the panel with us. Then also, it's my pleasure to introduce Executive Director of UN Habitat, Madam Maimouna Mohammed Sharif. She will also talk about the Assembly. And also with us, we have Raf Toots, who is Director of the Global Solutions Divisions at UN Habitat. And Raf would be able to give you more technical information and more specific information about the work of the different committees, resolutions, and decisions that are proposed by the United Nations Habitat Assembly. So without further ado, I would like to give the floor to the Vice President of the United Nations Habitat Assembly, His Excellency Martin Ajay Mensah Korsa.
Thank you very much, Madam Executive Director. All protocols observed. I will give largely my impressions about this session. I think that first of all, we want to extend a hand of gratitude to the organizers, especially Madam Sharif, Maimouna Sharif, and her outfit for the wonderful organization of this year's assembly. For the 2 days that I've been here, I've chaired the bureau meetings and the assembly, and I must say I've been very, very impressed about the conduct of affairs. It's been very, very good. A lot of collaboration and cooperation among various committees, especially the drafting committee and the committee of whole. They've had to spend a lot of time doing a lot of work. And I'm again impressed by the level of cooperation that is existed. We made a lot of progress. Yesterday, we've passed about 9 resolutions, and we are left with just a few to go. But it has been generally good. And my impression of affairs has been very, very good. Various statements on the floor from countries gives the impression that a lot is being done by the UN Habitat. From Ghana, we are strong advocates of this platform because of its transformative effect. And we are holding on to achieving the SDGs and the new urban agenda. Government's programs and policies have fully embedded in them action plans that will lead to the realization of these. And so we are fully committed to the platform. We congratulate ourselves for coming this far, so far, and I pray that the subsequent event will come to a successful close, and then we see the others forward. So I'm grateful for the opportunity. I thank you, and I congratulate everybody for your presence. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Excellency, for your remarks. And now I would like to pass the floor to the Executive Director of UN Habitat, Madam Maimouna Mohammed Sharif, and she will update you more about the work that was performed and some of the results and achievements of the United Nations Habitat Assembly.
Thank you very much, Katerina. Excellency Vice President of the UN Habitat Assembly, my colleague Raf, Excellencies, media representative, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your support and for all the time that you spent with us these last 5 days. The second session of the United Nations Habitat Assembly was a true demonstration of the effective and efficient multilateralism in action. Delegates from 137 countries worked truly productively and collaboratively and managed to achieve great results and progress over these 5 days of deliberation. The biggest achievement that I personally can report from the second UN Habitat Assembly is that member states prioritize adequate housing by expecting to adopt a resolution on adequate housing for all. They renewed their call to consider housing as a human right for the first time since 1948, when the Universal Declaration of Human Rights was adopted. So the global housing crisis affects all of us. So it is present in all regions of the world. You can hear during the plenary and also the side event. Almost all countries are struggling to ensure their citizens have access to affordable and adequate housing. 1.6 billion people around the world continue to live in inadequate shelter. This number might be even higher, as we still have not factored in those people impoverished by the COVID-19 pandemic and displaced by the ongoing conflicts. Housing is also our collective global failure. This is why I'm so happy that the member states are prioritizing housing, and through this proposed resolution are agreeing to set up a mechanism to accelerate housing program and develop an international platform for collecting, reporting, and evaluating housing data. 10 resolutions are proposed for adoption. Among them are international guidelines on people-centered smart city, accelerating the transformation of informal settlement and slum by 2030, World Cleanup Day, biodiverse and resilient cities, localization of SDG, urban planning and sustainable infrastructure, creation of a human settlement resilient framework, and equitable financing and effective monitoring of the implementation of UN Habitat Assembly resolutions. As I mentioned many times over the past days, we need to act and implement resolutions. That's why I am particularly happy that we have a resolution that can help us monitor the implementation of resolution adopted by the UN Habitat Assembly. Another notable achievement of the United Nations Habitat Assembly was the adoption of the decisions to extend our strategic plan until 2025 and start preparatory work to develop a new strategic plan for 2026 to 2029. This decision helps to align UN Habitat's planning cycle with the UN's quadrennial comprehensive policy review of operational activities and help us to streamline our processes and management. The current members of the Executive Board and the Assembly Bureau had their term extended until the closure of the resumed second session of the United Nations Habitat Assembly. The resumed assembly is set to take place 29 to 30th May 2025. I'm also happy to see the renewed interest of the member state in advancing the new urban agenda and also the urban agenda itself. This is evidence from the participation in the assembly. We had a total of 3,416 participants present here in person. About 1,000 people attended online. This is twice as big as the first Habitat Assembly. At the second assembly, we have 137 member states and observers, states and bodies represented. During the first assembly, we had 124. So the local governments and the private sector represented 10% and 8% of the delegates, whereas national governments around 35%. This demonstrates that we are not only doing the talk, but also walking the walk on multilateralism by involving local and regional governments in urban discussions and forums like this. So over the past 5 days, we heard a lot of national statements. Many of them echoed each other and called for multilateralism to share knowledge. It was a clear front-runner for Assembly. This definitely inspires us to look further and see how we can share knowledge and translate solutions for urban challenges between countries and regions. The work on developing resolution is done. Now we had to make sure they are adopted in the plenary and implemented. So thank you so much for your attention. Asante sana. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Executive Director, for this overview of the results and achievements of the Second United Nations Habitat Assembly. Now I would like to give the floor to my colleague, Raf Toots, who is Director of Global Solutions Division. And Raf can give probably a bit more background and explanation of these results and achievements that were mentioned by the Executive Director. The floor is yours, Raf.
Thank you very much, Katerina. Thanks to the Vice President and also to the Executive Director. I will be brief because there's so much to say, but I just want to provide a few highlights, some more technical highlights about the results that the Executive Director and the Vice Presidents have already introduced. And I'll start with the resolution on adequate housing for all. As the Executive Director, this is a historic resolution because it picks up of where we left the housing issue in 1948. So it's a real overdue, and it is because housing has become an issue that's not only an issue in developing countries, it's a global issue of access, affordability, financing of housing, of dignified housing for billions of people in this world. And so the first step that this resolution will do, apart from asking governments to pay more attention to this very important issue, and they are creating an open-ended intergovernmental expert working group that will report to the Assembly 6 years from now, and that will have to develop a framework to measure and report on the adequacy of housing across different national and local contexts, and allow for exchange of experiences about housing. So fundamentally what we're doing here is moving away from the idea that housing is a national issue that can be solved and should be solved at the national level, to lifting this to a truly international issue that will benefit from exchange to really give housing the place where it deserves as a pillar of social cohesion and as a fundamental element of the social contract that we aim to see as a very important element of the Summit of the Future next year. So that's a very important element. Maybe, and I cannot give all the details, but I would like to say that the resolution on localization is also tremendously important, because this is work that we have been carrying out with other UN agencies over the past 5 years, but it was never formalized. And now the resolution is calling about all UN agencies and member states to bring to the fore the localization and the power of localization. That means giving power to local and subnational governments and local actors to accelerate the implementation of the SDGs, including through the United Nations Sustainable Development Country Programs and other investments that happen at the country level. So this is something that, again, is very much appreciated. And maybe just to give one more example is on smart cities, which is a topic, and we are formally calling this people-centered smart cities. The resolution is asking the executive director to develop over the next 2 years international guidelines on people-centered smart cities. And this is to help both national and local authorities to have smart city regulations and strategies that will ensure that the digital infrastructure is contributing to making cities and human settlements more sustainable, inclusive, and prosperous. And the reason why this resolution has been developed is because we see too often that cities are confronted with vendors that come with all types of technologies, but that the purpose for making cities smart is often put in the background. We want to put the purpose of more inclusive, more sustainable cities in the foreground, and that smart cities technologies would serve that purpose. And this is, the guidelines will be developed in that way, and of course will then help local authorities, and we are ready to provide technical assistance to local authorities to develop such strategies at a local level. I'll leave it here. There are many other resolutions on biodiversity, on climate action, and we can get into detail. There's some very exciting new initiatives that will now start as a result of these resolutions. But as the executive director has said, the implementation is key, and implementation means capacities, resources, and we will have to start from next week to find ways on how to implement each of these 9 substantive resolutions, as well as the ministerial declaration and also the resolution that talks about the monitoring of our resolutions. So I'll leave it here, and we can further discuss if there are specific questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ralph, for this very understandable and very, very clear brief. It was quite good to understand what are the major issues and breakthroughs and achievements. So we have done with our statements, and now is the part where we are opening the floor for questions. If I can ask you, please, once you take the mic and ask your question, if you can introduce yourself, the outlet you're representing and who you are, and who do you address the question to?
Okay, thanks, Katarina. Naftali Mora is my name. I'm a Kenyan journalist but working for Xinhua News Agency, that's Chinese state-owned media. Madam Executive Director, of course, we were with you 2 weeks ago. Remember the exclusive interview we had with you 2 weeks ago as Chinese media. And of course, you highlighted those issues that are likely to be discussed here. And of course, I've heard about the 9 resolutions. My big issue is, have we set implementation timelines for these resolutions? Say something like affordable housing. What should we expect as member states 1 year down the line, 2 years down the line? Are we likely to find some 300,000 housing units in Lagos or in Nairobi or in India or in any other place? And the other elephant in the room is the financing. All these things cannot be achieved without sustained, reliable, and adequate financing. Where are we going to get the financing from, and whom are we likely to approach? Thank you.
Thank you very much for your question, Xinhua News Agency. So I give the floor to Madam Executive Director.
Thank you very much for that question, Sia. When the adequate housing for the resolution on the adequate housing, what we would like to see, as what my colleague Raf said just now, when is it gavel hopefully this afternoon, then we next week, I already has the instruction, next week we will sit down and see not only on the housing but all the resolution, how can we implement it globally, what are the mechanism, what are the system, and how can we implement in terms of the timeline. But at the moment now, if you ask me As you said, how many units in certain country, honestly, we don't have that. But we must have the resolution first. Once they have the resolution, then we will come out with the implementation plan. But we cautioned much earlier, whatever resolution that we put up must be implementable, as in terms of the financing, in terms of the structure, and definitely we have our regional representative of every region. So we will discuss at the UN Habitat level, and I also would like to call also all the member states who attended and involved in the UN Habitat Assembly also to take home this resolution and have their the mechanism to implement the resolution in terms of the financing, the types of, for example, just take housing, the type of housing that maybe they will come out with the policies, because different countries have a different situation in terms of the housing situation, and maybe they have a different strategy from different continent to other continent. So to discuss, to give a bit detail on this, I pass the floor to my colleagues. Raf, over to you, Raf.
Thank you, Executive Director. Indeed, you know, the resolution is not yet passed, so the work plan, initially this will be a 6-year work plan, because we are expected to deliver results by 2029. That's in the resolution, so that the Executive Director will have to report back on the work of this working group at the 3rd session. But of course, we cannot wait 6 years. You know, in terms of financing, there is enough money in the world for housing. The problem is that it's not invested in the segments of housing that are left behind. And typically that is the lowest 20% of the percentile of the incomes, because the developers find it not profitable to put money in these housing, or they do it in places that are totally inaccessible, that create other costs like commuting costs, etc. So we need to, that's why this resolution is bringing countries together to learn from each other and create a form of solidarity that will then incite investors also to put money there with the necessary guarantees that will allow governments to provide incentives in collaboration with the private sector to increase the supply of housing, to bring the prices down, and to make sure that this affordability gap is closed. And this applies both to countries like Kenya, also to LDCs, but also to countries in the WEO group, in the Western European group, and in the United States, where the housing, especially in certain cities, is at unsustainable levels. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Executive Director and Raf. Any more? The lady here at the back.
Sophie Mkwena from the South African Broadcasting Corporation, SABC. I just want to find out, the ED spoke about a political will. When we look at what's happening globally right now, the world is drifting apart. How confident are you that particularly leaders of the world will be committed to ensuring that all what you discussed and resolutions that you have taken are implemented? That political will, what guarantees do we have that the politicians will deliver? Because ordinary people are suffering. It's bad on the continent in particular.
Thank you very much, Sophie and CABC. And can you clarify, is your question for the Executive Director or any other panel member? Anyone? So who?
So
Excellency, maybe.
My little brief is that all of this engagement is happening on the wheels of multilateralism. And once we increase our engagement and as countries with that collaboration, and the will should be there for us to push through and ensure that we get it right. What is important is we're engaging on one platform with one accord and a clear direction as to what to do to ensure that cohesiveness so we can come together and do. So I think that it's a good platform of increased multilateralism, and that should be able to bring in the necessary anchors for us to push and achieve our goals.
Thank you very much. Yes, please. China Daily.
Thank you. I'm from China Daily. My question goes to Director Rafael Toots. You just mentioned about a guideline on building smart cities. So I want to ask about the role of artificial intelligence, because in recent years, many people are talking about AI in the building of smart cities. How do you think the role of artificial intelligence in the building of smart cities? Thank you.
Thank you very much for your question, Raf.
Thank you very much. No, artificial intelligence will no doubt play a major role in smart cities. It will probably be the dominating feature in the coming years that will shape further the development of smart cities. Now, what these guidelines are going to do is to provide not only the principles, but the practical guidelines how local authorities can navigate amongst all the offers related to artificial intelligence. That means what to go for, how to develop a strategy, where to start, how to finance it, and also how to ensure that the rights of the citizens are preserved, are not infringed, including rights of privacy. So there's a number of issues that are coming together in smart cities. If you want to keep people at the center, and we don't go for a technological approach, but for a people-centered approach, we can do a lot with artificial intelligence, but we need to protect the rights of the people and to make sure that it remains a people-centered approach. Thank you.
Thank you very much. A gentleman there at the back and then at the front.
Thank you. My name is Ruben. I'm a freelance journalist for the Voice of America. My question goes to Madam Maimuna and also the other distinguished panelists. Taking stock 4 years later after the first assembly, where do you see significant progress? Are there some shining examples you can share with us, cities that are taking the right steps towards the right direction? And also, what are cities and governments doing right, and what are they getting wrong? Thank you.
Thank you very much, VOA, for the question. And
okay, thank you so much for that question. Yeah, the first UN-Habitat Assembly was in 2019, and second is 2023. And we have our global COVID-19 pandemic in 2020. I think that is also give a lot of impact to the livelihood of the people on the ground. So, and also the role of the cities and the governors or the mayors at the front line during the global crisis, may it the climate action, a climate change crisis, either is it natural like a flooding, drought, and heat wave, and also other crises. And every cities, of course, have to face the different types of challenges in this different continent. So they have playing their role as a frontliner to face these challenges. So to pinpoint any one city that is as an example, or a right example or wrong example, I think that is very difficult for us. But when we had our studies, if you read our publication on the cities and pandemic, we have the research from 1,700 cities, how they react and take action during the pandemic in the different continent and different situation, I think that we have to commend the role of local government in facing these challenges. And now, UN Habitat 2023, we have seen out of the last 4 years, and the issues of climate change, issues of the urban crisis, and also the impact of these two elements, I think will really give us some indication. And as you see from our paper and our theme, that the 5 areas that we put forward, I hope that by having this resolution endorsed by the Habitat Assembly, we can bring it up, and not only in term, as I said again, not only in term of the resolution, but more on the implementation, so that in the next Habitat Assembly in 2027, we hope that we can get positive impact of what the 5 days that we have been discussing in Nairobi now. So let's work together. That's the reason why the theme is the multilateral collaboration, as what the Vice President of the Habitat Assembly said just now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Edie and Raf. I think the question was both to you and to Madam Executive Director. So I don't know if you want to add something or not.
Well, I would, you see, it's not easy to give examples, and we need to be cautious, because many cities have done great things over the past years, but it's very hard to find a city that has done very well in all areas and consistently over a long period. Because sustainable urban development is something that you cannot fix one time. It's something that you need to continue working on time and again. And resilience is a very key element to that, because you don't know which shocks are going to come. Who could have predicted that there was going to be a COVID-19 pandemic, which has fundamentally changed the way cities deal with their citizens, etc. But I would like to give some examples. I don't think it's bad to praise some of the cities that have done well, but they have not done well across the board. Cities like Bogota, cities like Durban, Singapore, Chicago, Rotterdam, these are cities that have excelled in some areas of sustainable urban development, but maybe they're lagging behind on others. And I think that's the interesting part of this work, that it is a continuous type of work, and it will not be possible to find a city that ticks all the marks. This is very important to emphasize. This is something that is forever. Every local government will have to reassess the priorities, sharpen the tools, and again move forward to try to make progress towards sustainable urban development. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think there was also a question from the front. The lady is here.
Nita Bala from Context. This is to the VP of the Assembly. At the opening session, the Kenyan president had made a very strong point on housing, but he had said that there were discriminatory practices in development financing. And I just wanted to hear from you whether that was something that you agreed with and something that you had seen in your own country.
Thank you very much.
I wasn't around when the president of Kenya, gave the statement. So I was trying to hear from the executive director what exactly there was. So I may want to pass it on to her.
I would like to hear what your thoughts are and the situation and experiences in your country in terms of development financing and whether you feel the system as it is works or whether there are issues there that need to be.
Yes, it works, but I think largely it comes to the issue of financing. Once you have financing, and then you can back it up with the ideas you want to achieve. Otherwise, in the broad framework, and whatever ideas that you take boils down to how you actualize it and make sure that you achieve those. But from where I come from, yes, the challenge is there, the will to deal with it is there, but the challenge has to do with the resources of the financing to back whatever actions that you want to take to achieve that.
Do you feel that the current system of multilateral lending is really working for many African countries? Certainly in Kenya, we're seeing massive interest being paid, which is crippling the country, and the country's not able to then invest in social protection schemes or other social issues. Do you feel that there is discriminatory issues in the way African countries, for example, are lending from multilateral donors and institutions?
Well, I would not say discriminatory per se, but we have to look at the terms of engagement because there appears to be an imbalance. It could be made better because to the extent that assessing them becomes a challenge and also the options are limited. You just have to engage, but on what terms? So I think it's important to take a second look at how we engage and what options are available. Otherwise, then it's a real challenge, but I would not say discriminatory. We may have to look at the terms of engagement and how we can better negotiate and get a better situation for ourselves.
Thank you very much. Maybe we take one more question. Are there more questions? So maybe the two questions we take, and then I think the time is running.
Hi, I'm Amrita Batnal. I'm an editor at the Thomson Reuters Foundation. I was very interested to know that there is a framework on housing data that's being proposed. This question is to Raf. Can you talk a little bit more about what is the status of the data as we have it right now and what is missing, and how can we make sure that this data that will be collected will be from all the countries, that have the capacity to collect this data, and how that capacity will be built further? Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I think a very good question, a bit technical, but I'll still try to respond. I'll give you an example. A couple of years ago, we saw this thing coming, that the housing affordability data are critical. And we teamed up with McKinsey Global Institute. As you know, McKinsey, one of the large consultancy firms, and they could use their network of offices, thousands of offices, to collect data on what they call the affordability gap. That means what a household is paying for a mortgage or for rent, and the nominal 30% which is recommended as a maximum to pay. And many households pay more than 30%. So they were able to calculate that. But you see, this was done, it was a very interesting study. It was done once, 10 years ago. We need such studies to be monitored on a continuous basis, and the data to be shared and to be publicly available, and not only data on the household affordability, but on other aspects of housing and housing access related to the financing of housing, related to the basic services, related to the tenure that is required to have sustainable housing investments. So what is proposed in this resolution is to create this working group which has to come up with this common database across countries where data on all these aspects of housing is shared and made available. And for that, we'll have to work with academic institutions, with statistical organizations, and also where needed with institutes from private sector that have valuable data that all will come together in this framework where member states will then be able to report back to the next session of the Assembly in 2029 about measures to improve access to affordable housing. Thank you.
We don't really have a global measure of, the lack of affordable housing.
Well, we have indicators. As you know, we have the Sustainable Development Goal 11, which has a target on adequate housing, basic services, which includes an element of affordability. But if you look at the data, they're very incomplete. They're not robust. We have a lot of work to do to move forward in this area. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. And the last question.
Thank you. I'm Horopios from K254 Nairobi News. Now, there's this sector that is usually mostly affected by, and is the housing when we have earthquakes. So I wanted to ask whether there was an address on earthquake technologies that can sustain, and maybe when there are such issues, no harm can happen.
Thank you very much for your question. Maybe I think, Ralph, if you can take it.
All right, I'll do this with an example. As you know, we had very recently a very devastating earthquake in Turkey and Syria, and we saw the loss of life and the loss of infrastructure, loss of livelihoods, and environmental damage as a result of this earthquake. In fact, the earthquake technologies are available. You look at countries like Japan and Turkey and Chile, they have very advanced, very sophisticated technologies to withstand very severe earthquakes. Problem is implementation and oversight of regulations. You must have heard, different in the media. It's not good enough just to have the regulations and the technology. It's also about the implementation. And I think that's an issue that is sometimes overlooked when we talk about earthquake-resistant building. It's also true to say that adding earthquake-resistant measures will add to the cost of your investment, and that's often a reason why contractors would look for shortcuts to make cheaper buildings that do not have all these things, which often leads to very devastating consequences. So it's not an issue about lack of technology, it's more an issue of lack of implementation and supervision, oversight, etc. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I would like to thank the media for all the questions. I think those were very interesting and very pertinent questions. And then I also would like to thank our participants for their responses and for the time they spent to come here and to explain us what we can expect this evening when we are concluding the second United Nations Habitat Assembly. So we had with us today the Vice President of the United Nations Habitat Assembly, His Excellency Martin J. Mensah-Corsa. Also we had Executive Director of UN Habitat, Madam Maimouna Mohamed Sharif, and Raf Toots, who is Director of the Global Solutions Divisions of UN Habitat. I thank you very much for your statements and for your responses. And let's look for the implementation. Let's see which resolutions are going to be gavelled, and then we'll start working on them. Thank you very much, and goodbye.